Diablo 4 is not only an awesome game, but a fairly complex one if you're new to the series, and even though the game tries to lay everything out for you, it can still be a little daunting. Hi, my name is Fallout, and today I want to go over 13 tips and tricks that will help you better understand and enjoy Diablo 4. Tip number 1, turn these settings on. Open the in-game menu, hit Options, then head over to the Gameplay tab and turn on both Advanced Tooltip Compare and Advanced Tooltip Information. Both of these options are really going to help you out in terms of getting a better idea of how good your gear is and how good new gear you've just picked up is in comparison. Advanced Tooltip Info gives you information on things like item property ranges, lucky hit chance on skills, and more. Advanced Tooltip Compare will now give you a very easy to understand summary of what buffs exactly you'll be both gaining and losing when comparing your current gear to new gear that you've picked up off the ground in-game. Yeah, it might be a little bit of information overload for a few people, but I really appreciate the game giving me all of the info up front. Considering how often it feels like you're drowning in loot in Diablo 4, turning these two options on makes it easier to make the best possible decision on equipping or scrapping new gear that you find. Tip number 2, use the sort feature. As long as we're talking about managing your loot hauls a little bit easier, don't forget to take advantage of the small red sort button borderline hidden off to the right in your equipment menu. Clicking the sort button will immediately organize your loot by both type of loot and then by power level. After sorting, now all my helmets are bunched together and the best ones go from left to right, and then the next type of equipment organized the same way, and so on and so forth. If you play on controller, pretty sure all you gotta do is hit R3, aka push the right joystick in on whatever controller you got. Tip number 3, for the love of God, always drink your damn elixirs. Really kicking myself for completely forgetting about this one so many times while grinding. In the Consumables tab of your character menu is where you keep all of your acquired and crafted elixirs. If you're grinding or even just playing the play, you should always have a fresh one of these applied. Not only do they give you great buffs that will make your character stronger or harder to kill, they also increase the amount of XP you get by 5% for 30 minutes. If you go to the alchemist in town and check the craft elixirs tab, you can make these provided you have the resources to do so. But even the absolute weakest, cheapest elixirs in the game come with the extra XP bonus, so there's basically no reason to not make a butt ton of these and just constantly have the extra XP buff applied. You'll know when your elixir has run out because the following icon will appear on your screen when you chug one, and it'll eventually go away over time, letting you know it's time to get your drank on again. And speaking of extra XP, tip number 4, if you can, group up. I know there's going to be times when you're probably going to want to play Diablo 4 solo, but if you can, try to drag a friend into the game with you and play together. The game straight up gives you extra XP gains when playing in a group. Game's more fun when played with the homies anyway. Tip number 5, try to salvage more than you sell. If you're a new Diablo 4 player, you're probably going to really get hit with the urge to sell a lot of your extra gear that you deem not good enough to equip onto your character. I'd really recommend that if you can help it, try to salvage at the blacksmith more than you sell. The deeper you get into Diablo, the more you're going to want to take advantage of himping out your gear via imprinting and enchanting with your friendly neighborhood occultists. Doing that ain't cheap, and it's going to require materials that you can get via salvaging rare and legendary gear. I know it's really tempting to feel like Scrooge McDuck in a big ass pile of gold, but again, those rare mats are really important, so be sure to salvage more than you sell. And while we're on the subject, tip number 6, learn how the occultist works. Enchanting, extracting, and imprinting can be really intimidating if you're a new player, but they're vital to making stronger builds. Enchanting works like so. Do you have a piece of gear that you mostly like, but maybe you're annoyed that one specific trait isn't something that you really care about? Well, enchant it and pick a different trait for that piece of gear that maybe you vibe with a little bit more. You can do that as many times as you want, provided you can afford it. Extract aspect. Let's say you have a piece of legendary gear with a unique trait that you really like, but you've been wearing the gear for so long it's been power crept to hell. Just extract that unique trait out of the gear that you really like via the occultist. It will destroy the gear in question, but you'll now have the unique aspect saved in your inventory, which you can find in the aspect tab of your character menu. Once you have that aspect extracted, why not imprint it onto a new piece of gear? Use the imprint feature and be sure to drag the aspect in question from your inventory onto the piece of gear, and booyah, good to go. You can also imprint a piece of gear with something from your Codex of Power, which by the way is unlimited use. Which brings me to tip number 7, do dungeons. Unlike aspects from your inventory, which again are single use, imprinting unique traits from your Codex of Power is unlimited for you to do. The only drawback is you can only imprint what you've unlocked, so to have a really full and complete complete Codex of Power, you gotta complete a bunch of dungeons to really fill up your codex. Opening and looking at your map, you can prioritize what aspects might look good to you. Some dungeons have aspects that can only be used by a certain class, but other dungeons have aspects that can be used by any class. Again, just look around and make the call on what aspects you think might be fun to unlock and put onto your gear. If you haven't revealed the entire map yet, don't worry, because there's plenty of community-made maps out there that have marked the location and reward of every dungeon in the game. So go ahead and check what's out there and make a plan on which dungeons you want to knock off. And while we're on the subject of community-made maps, tip number 8, hit up every altar of Lilith that you can. Altars of Lilith are scattered throughout Diablo 4, and each altar is a one-time activation that gives all of your characters a permanent passive benefit. Things like extra stat points or extra paragon points, things that will really actually beef up your character and make them more powerful overall. Like before, there is no shortage of community-made maps out there that can straight up just tell you every altar location in the game. I'll go ahead and link one down below in the comment section. Your own in-game map, though, will tell you which statues you've already found and activated. Tip number 9, remember your renown. By just playing the game in each region of Sanctuary, you slowly unlock additional benefits that can power up your character, but you actually have to remember to claim those benefits. Gonna be completely honest with you, I occasionally forget about this from time to time. Open up your map, then hit W if you're on PC, or whatever option appears right here if you're on controller. You can then claim things like bonus XP, gold, and even extra skill points, O-balls, or paragon points. If you notice you're near complete on any particular region, just head on over there and push yourself over the edge if the reward looks good to you. Or just keep playing the game normally, because again, it should all happen naturally over time anyway. Tip number 10, really shouldn't be saying this, but doing this because of a friend of mine who apparently didn't know, upgrade your potions. I had a buddy of mine who was probably around level 40 or so who didn't know that you had the ability to upgrade the potency of your potions. And even though I'm sure this is a really forehead tip, I can guarantee you that at least a small handful of players out there are about to have their minds blown. Just go to the Alchemist and upgrade the potency of your potion in the Upgrade Potion tab. That's pretty much it. It requires you to be a certain level and have a few materials to get that upgrade, but doing that will make your healing potions way stronger and maybe save your life. Tip number 11, say no to buying and yes to gambling on randomized gear. There are plenty of vendors out there in Sanctuary with a rotating inventory of gear for sale. And while you can maybe buy something that's better than what you currently got, you should try to hold off, especially if you're not in the end game yet. Diablo 4 just gives you so much loot. Even if you do buy something from the vendors in town, it's really likely that whatever you spent money on will get power crept in the next 15 minutes by you just playing the game normally. Far more often than not, you're better off saving your money. On the other hand, do not be shy about spending your O-balls, the currency you spend on getting randomized gear. There's a limit on how many O-balls you can carry, so if you forgot to spend them, you're literally leaving free gear on the table. In town, look for the money bag icon with a question mark on it, and then head there to spend your O-balls. Most of the time, you'll probably get junk, but I've got plenty of rare and legendary gear to drop from acquiring this randomized gear. And even if the gear isn't good enough to wear, you can just take it to the blacksmith and salvage it for free materials. Tip number 12, learn what keywords mean. This one might take a bit, but it's important if you really want to get the most out of putting a good build together. When looking at armor, weapons, or your skill tree, you're routinely going to come across keywords like vulnerable, stunned, overpower, fortified, and so on. You don't have to completely commit every term to memory, but learning what these mean in general, again, will help you. For example, overpower. Overpowering deals bonus damage based on the sum of your current life and your fortified life. And on that note, fortified. Fortified characters take 10% reduced damage, and you become fortified when you have more fortify than your current health. Understanding these terms will not only make you a more knowledgeable player, but give you a better idea of what gear to equip and what builds you want to put together. There are plenty of fan-made glossary cheat sheets that include every keyword. I will link one down in the video description. And finally, tip number 13, don't forget to repair and upgrade to a degree. With how easy it is to get sucked into grinding Diablo 4, you might forget to do important things like repairing your gear or drinking water IRL. For the former, go to the blacksmith and make sure that your gear isn't completely degraded, which will make it less effective in combat, which you don't want. While you're there, be sure to upgrade your gear maybe just a little bit. I know that I just mentioned that you shouldn't buy things because a lot of loot drops very frequently and you'll just get newer, better gear right off the ground, but upgrading is a little bit different, and the further you get into the game, you'll slowly start to get better loot a little bit less frequently. And even before you're at the end game, upgrading your gear is a very viable thing to do. After all, there are multiple levels of upgrading your gear, and while I wouldn't recommend completely upgrading your gear all the way out to max before hitting the end game of Diablo 4, you could just upgrade it 2 or even 3 times to just get a little bit more oomph out of a piece of gear that you already wear a lot and enjoy. At the lower levels, basic upgrading is very cheap, and just those tiny upgrades really can add up together for a lot more damage and benefits overall. If you've got any extra tips that you think will help your fellow gamers tackle Sanctuary, I would love to hear from you. Drop them down below in the comment section. I'll start with one of my very own in the pinned comment that I didn't really feel the need to throw in and make today's video any longer. Do me a favor, would you click the like button on today's video if you got any value out of it? Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on stream.